Well, I think we should look at the two countries. Yes, by a stroke of, by an accident of history, both countries are celebrating and having the same birthdays. China is about 11 years older than Nigeria. And so, to a very large extent, you could say that China is the older brother. And not only that, China's economy is the second largest in the world, and it is envisaged that in the next few years, China will have the largest economy in the world. And so the question you'll be asking yourself is, how come that Nigeria, that is just about 11 years younger than China, finds herself in the kind of serious situation that she finds herself in? And then how come China, again 11 years older than Nigeria, has been able to achieve so much in such a short space of time? Because the rapid development we have seen with China occurred in the last 30 years. But it has been something that has been on before now. And it is down to the leadership and ability of China's, uh, um, leaders to bring China to this path that she is today, she's in today, and has become a global powerhouse. And that is the reality. Of course, you could also say that China's civilization is about 4,000 years old, but still, regardless of that, China has had some ups and downs, especially the period after the World War and all that. So China has been in terms of what China has been able to do, China has been quite impressive. So Nigeria needs to learn a lot from China. Nigeria, especially Nigeria's political elites, because that is what leadership. If you're talking about China today and what China has been able to do, it's about the leadership of those who have been in charge of China. And conversely, if you look at it the other way too, why Nigeria, a country that, one of the most blessed country in the world in terms of natural and human resources, has not exactly been able to get it right, which is also say down to leadership. So Nigeria has to learn something from China when it comes to, and I think the first is leadership. What kind of leadership has been in charge of China all this while? Obviously, it has to be a leadership that has shown a lot of commitment to the nation state, and all that. So I think that has also played a role. But at this particular point in time, we acknowledge the fact that we are not in a good place. I'm talking of Nigeria. And I think it is that acknowledgement by the president that has taken him to China. Yes, we need to improve on trade. We need to improve on so many things. He wants to discuss with captains of industry who are some of the big boys in Chinese industry. And at the same time, and I think a lot of people have not even looked at it as a factor. One of the reasons we went to China, I don't know, perhaps to smoothen the relationship between Nigerian government at the the state level and maybe Chinese companies. You know that in the past few weeks, we've had issues with some Chinese companies who have gone the extra mile of using arbitration or the court process internationally to seize Nigerian assets. So perhaps the Nigerian president would also discuss that with his Chinese counterpart so that he can also put pressure on the private sector, perhaps to cool down on that and look for other ways to resolve this issue amicably. People have not talked about that, but it's not impossible that the president would, was supposed to bring it up before Chinese president. Perhaps he did bring it up. So that's one other area of looking at it. But we have a lot to learn from China. China doesn't need to learn as much as we need to learn from them. But then the reality is that the Chinese have been experts when it comes to the use of soft diplomacy to make friends and to sustain friendships. And we have seen that. And so what you see today happening, some of these cultural relationships have implications at the political level, um, and at the economic level. Because once you are able to establish some kind of relationship, at the cultural level, it extends to other facets of life. You can see some prominent Nigerians attending this, event. These are Nigerians that have some clout within the polity. You saw the members of the Committee on China Nigeria, relationship also come for this event. These are people that would be influential, that would have a voice when it comes to matters that are of interest to the Chinese. They will defend that relationship. So I think these are some of the things we also have to look at. Yeah.
Is Nigeria actually ready? Do we need to do some house cleaning, some housekeeping before this relationship, uh, blossoms further? What should Nigerians do to position themselves properly, such that they are not found in the receiving end?
Yeah. In a way, the reality is that Nigeria has declined internationally. And look, there's no need for sentiment. We need to, acknowledge some things about ourselves. And it's only in doing that that you'll be able to realize that there's a problem. We need to do something. We remember Nigeria in the 70s and early 80s. Remember how influential Nigeria was in Africa, in West Africa, in Africa. We remember the role Nigeria played with regards to the apartheid movement and what Nigeria did with some of the Southern African countries, how we are able to spend enormous resources to help our sister countries, fellow countries in Africa, especially South Africa at that particular point in time. Nigeria confronted the former colonial overlords. When we pulled out of one of the Commonwealth Games that took place, was it in Scotland or so? And that pitted the British Prime Minister against the Queen of England, who accused the British Prime Minister, then Margaret Thatcher, of trying to destroy the Commonwealth. That was the kind of clout we had once Nigeria pulled out in protest against their continuous collaboration with apartheid South Africa. The rest of Africa pulled out. That's the kind of strength we have. We no longer have that. So, and in international relationship, the strength you project outside is the strength you have at home. So you must be able to project strength outside. You cannot do that if you're not strong at home. So from that perspective comes the issue of the house cleaning that you talked about. We need to get it right. We need to try we need to strive to resolve some of our inherent socioeconomic contradictions that have kept the Nigerian state down, that have stopped the Nigerian state from exercising the kind of influence she once had. We have that ability because we still have important natural resources that can be used to achieve this level of greatness. We still also have the population. And for those people who have always theorized that when you have a very serious population, that it is a deficit because it puts a strain on the resources of a country. How wrong can a person be? That is not the truth. Population is a source of strength when you're strong, and that is why it is projected that in the next 30 years, the 25% of the youthful population of the world is going to come from Africa. And it is also projected that if Africa's political leadership can get it right, that Africa will rule the world. Africa will play a much more dominant role in world politics. And that is the truth. So you look at the population of China, you ask yourself, how is China able to make the kind of giant strides she has been able to make with this kind of population? It's about leadership. It's about also using this population as a source of strength to generate the kind of economic energy, the kind of energy that is needed to run the country. And they have been able to do that to a very large extent. You have seen not just the Chinese, the things they are doing, the industrial hubs that you see all over China, that China has become the manufacturing, center of the world. But you have seen Chinese citizens go to other parts of the world also and play critical roles, there too. So you also see India, what India has been able to do with very large populations. You see the United States, you see Brazil. So population is a strength, and we have the population in this country. It's about how you utilize your population, especially the youthful population. If you are able to do that and get your youth meaningfully engaged, the kind of very serious economic activities that it can generate can only augur well for the good and the progress and development of the country. So we need to, I agree 100%, we need to do some house cleaning. We need to get our acts right. We need the political leadership to be upstanding and to recommit themselves and rededicate themselves to this country. Once that we can do that, and they begin to work in tandem with the hopes and aspirations of their citizens, then we can begin to move from where we are and then engage countries like China, not on an equal footing because they are too far gone in terms of what they've been able to do, but we'll be able to make a more meaningful impact in our relationship with them.
What will be the repercussions, in your view, of Nigeria not having its own house clean before these relationships go further than they are now?
Then the benefit will always continue to be skewed to the advantage of one against the other. You're talking about trade, for instance. What kind of trade, for instance, can we do with China other than raw materials, other than crude oil and other raw materials? And don't also forget the fact that Africa has always been, the world has always been the destination, especially in the developed parts of the world, in Asia and Europe and America included. They've always been the destination hub of Africa's raw materials. And it has been stated again that we need to get to a level where we can also begin to add value to the resources that we have, so that it is when you do that and you begin to develop your home industries, whether in agriculture, whether in mining, whether in this, in other areas, that you can actually begin to make a bigger impact. Of course, we will always continue to, they need raw materials. China needs raw materials. The way the Chinese, economy has grown exponentially, they are voraciously always in, seeking for energy, sources of energy all over the world. They need to keep their industries going, and that's why countries like Nigeria, with all of the resources we have, are also a benefit to China, So, yes, that relationship continues. But I think that we also need to up the ante. We also need to begin to look for ways also to turn, our raw materials into finished products. So we can also send, and don't forget that when it comes to some of these raw materials, that the prices like cocoa, coffee and the rest, the prices are, determined by global economic dynamics, World Trade Organizations and all of that. So most times the prices of these products are usually low. But once they have turned them into finished products and they bring them into the country, the prices are determined not by the international price mechanisms, but are being determined by the producers, taking other cost, indicators into consideration. So we need to also move from that where we are to that level of also ensuring that we can actually add value to some of our products.
When they mention these Asian tigers, one will easily come to the conclusion, if you will, that perhaps there is more than meets the eyes anywhere the Chinese are involved. In Ghana, for instance, their mining sector has been badly polluted from the activities of the Chinese miners. There are some, semblance of that also happening in Nigeria. What do you expect the two leaders to further discuss by means of or avenues of using their ministers to interface together to ensure that there is a clearly laid down procedure such that if mining, which is one of the areas that Nigeria desires to, partner with the Chinese government in education, in culture, in ICT technology, what would you advise?
Yeah, it's part of the house cleaning that you talked about, really. There's no doubt that you always have bad state and bad non-state actors engaged in activities in other countries. So you would also have that with the Chinese. But that's why they have embassies. That's why they have consulates, so that wherever some of their own people do not act in conformity with the laws of their host countries, they can also step in, and bring errant citizens to book. But we also need to have, because it's a two-way thing. For this kind of abuses to take place, also means that Chinese nationals might be engaged in that. Nigerian nationals are also engaged in that. So it's a mutually rewarding, negative business transaction between Nigerians and the Chinese counterpart. So what it means is that government must set standards and ensure that Nigerians follow those standards. The Chinese also have a duty to ensure that their citizens conform to the laws of the country, of their host countries. And so once they are able to do this, then you realize that these violations that we're talking about will not happen. They are actually happening because of a lacuna in governance, because people who should be doing their job are not doing their job. So once you have government officials, state actors doing their own bit, and then the operators within the system, whether the mining sector or other sectors of Nigeria's political economy, will conform to the laws of the land. So I think that these are, it's straight up, it's clear.
Do you think, finally, just before you go, do you think the floodgates have been opened in favor of the Chinese? Do you share those fears?
Yeah, there would always be fears, but again, we need to do so much. I started by saying that the relationship is skewed heavily in favor of the dominant economic power. And China is not competing and Nigeria cannot compete with China. The whole of Africa cannot compete with China. China competes with the United States, and then China competes with the whole of Europe together, acting as one. That's how strong the Chinese economy is. That's how visionary. It is as a result of visionary political leadership. So there are so many things that we need to do, at least to begin to propel us. We already have the basis. The basis is the wealth that the country has beneath the surface of the soil. But there's a wealth that is more important that Bill Clinton talked about when he came to Nigeria. He said it's not the wealth of under the soil that matters. It's the one that is here. And that is the truth. And that is why if you look at all the elements of national power, you're talking about energy, you're talking about technology, you're talking about population, you're talking about your military, you're talking about your civil service. These are elements of national power. But the most critical, the most important element of national power is leadership. Because it is the political leadership that can collate all of these other elements of national power and be able to articulate a vision and come up with a plan of implementation and encourage the people to move along that path. And so when you talk about the Asian tigers, it is a matter of leadership. At the time there were no tigers, then all of a sudden the tigers emerged. How did they emerge? They did not emerge from nowhere. They emerged from a process, a political and economic process that was articulated by visionary leadership. That's how they were able to get to where they are today. It is exactly the same thing with China. Look at where China was in 1950. Before, even before Chairman Mao, even during the period of Chairman Mao, they have Deng Xiaoping and then all the other Chinese political leadership. There was an agenda. And so when one was able to articulate certain policies that began the process of progress and development, once he left the scene, others followed, the same vision. And today, China is a global powerhouse. We need to have that. We have not had that consistency in terms of political leadership.
Do you think that because China has got very stiff penalties for corrupt practices in their country, even to the point of death penalty, do you think that that is lacking in Nigeria, or if should Nigeria have that? Do you think Nigeria would make more progress
It's not.
to tell itself the
No, no.
truth?
It has nothing to do with the death penalty. It has everything to do with the seriousness of political leadership. Don't forget that you have death penalty, in this country for certain levels of crimes. When kidnapping became a dominant pastime of criminal elements, some state house of assembly began to, promulgate the death penalty as punishment, as deterrent. Has that been able to deter anybody from criminality, from kidnapping? So that's what I'm trying to say. First of all, there must be a refocus. There must be, a change in values. There must be a new culture, a culture that has this disdain and contempt for bad behavior, especially at the level of political leadership. So once you have that, then you also have, a system of punishment. That is where you come in now. And you also have to make sure that the institutions of state, because part of the problem of the weakness of Nigeria as a whole is the weakness of the parts. And it is the weakness of the parts, also characterized by weakness of institutions, that lead to the weakness of the whole, the weakness of the Nigerian state itself. It's as a result of, so the Nigerian state, you could say, is the head. Then the institutions are the limbs, the hands and the legs. When the hands and the legs are weak, they cannot support the head. And so you have a problem. So we need to have that. Once you are able to have that, and then you build a culture of doing things, how you do things, a culture of values and all that. Anybody that deviates from that, you know that there will be punishment. It is at that level that when you impose punishment on defaulters or people who deviate from the norm, from the rule of law, then there will be severe punishment, and then others will take a lesson. But the issue is, where is that going to come from? It has to start from the very top. Because when you talk about corruption, we cannot presuppose that corruption is only from the lower rank. It is something that permeates, that also gets to head of political leadership. And so you can see how China has been able to do it. No matter where you are, even if you are the governor of a province or you're in charge of a province and you are found to be corrupt, the system moves against you. Even your own people will want to dissociate with you, and then there's the ultimate punishment. So that has also, contributed in ensuring that people do not fall out of line. And because the Chinese are aware that one bad apple could spoil the rest. So they make sure that once a bad apple is found, the bad apple is removed in full view of everybody, so that they know what happens to bad apples. And everybody learns a lesson. There are too many bad apples in the leadership echelon of this country. The very people who are supposed to make laws, who are supposed to move the country along a visionary path, are the very people who are sabotaging the process. So the question you now ask yourself is, who is going to bear the cat? It cannot be those who are also benefiting from the wrath. They are the ones that should set an example. A father and a mother set examples for the children. The children are not supposed to set examples for the parents. Because if the children want to do things the right way, and those who are running the home are moving in a different direction, it's not going to work. So the people on whom the mantle of leadership falls should be the very epitome of good conduct and good behavior. Then it will permeate down. And that's why you talk about body language. Because when the body language of a leader is disdainful of certain bad behavior, the tendency is for people to take heed and to take correction. But if the body language is diametrically opposed to good behavior, then the heart of the people is filled with rebellion. They want to do things for their own personal benefit because the people who are in charge, you know, are, are acting contrary to the dictates of what a normal society should be.